drunk diving, lie detector tests, and the body of a lost diver found with a knife lodged 11 inches deep in his chest, over 100 feet deep in an unexplored underwater labyrinth. On September 11, 2002, police from Split in Croatia finally discovered the body of a caver that they had spent hours trying to locate inside an underwater cave in Poganica Bay. During the search, a rescue officer unfortunately lost his life, but what was most shocking about their discovery was the knife they found lodged inside the chest of the caver who had initially gone missing. So, was this a case of murder or suicide? This is the tragic story of the mysterious death in the cave beneath Poganica. Croatia's Salta Island is a slice of paradise with lush green vegetation and beautiful surrounding waters. The view from this island is not only scenic, but also a calming getaway from the busy life of the mainland. With a population of barely 2,000, there are not enough people to be distracted from nature's marvel. But along with the calming waters and beautiful view, the Bay of Poganica has something else: the various caves littered all over the coast. The locals in the coastal region have always believed that the caves house monsters in the waters. Folklores have always told of the dangers lurking in the underwater caves. It wasn't until recently that underwater cave divers started exploring the depths that lie underwater. But as far back as the early 2000s, no one had ever really gone down into the depths of these underwater caves. But as you well know, uncharted territories are to explorers what moths are to a flame. Any underwater cave diver would take great pride in being the one to explore these never-before-seen caves. And there was a group of friends, including one experienced caver, Miroslav Kuklis, who wanted to do exactly that. On the morning of September 10, 2002, the sailboat Domino departed from the Croatian town of Hvar, bound for the island of Vodnjak. Spirits were high among the 8-member crew who planned a day of diving not far off the coast of Poganica. The group included a mix of experienced divers, intermediate-level enthusiasts, and one non-diver. There was an initial dive into the water just to assess the surroundings, but when Miroslav found openings in the ground, it confirmed what they had already suspected, but they needed more time to prepare if they were going to go all the way down. After a leisurely day, they anchored at Poganica Bay on the island of Salta for the night. During dinner, the group discussed a hole in the seabed discovered by Miroslav. As the sun dipped below the horizon, 2 pairs of divers explored the surrounding waters, observing marine life under the cover of darkness. But their trip was brief and it left the divers unsatisfied. As they returned, Miroslav remained restless, tempted by the enigma of the underwater cave. He donned his gear, descended alone, and entered an underwater cave system again, but this time his second trip would be nothing like his first. The entrance stretched a few feet down before it widened into a tunnel about 7 feet wide. At the end of it was a divergence of 2 paths, one which led to a shallow tunnel and another leading to a deeper and more treacherous gallery. Due to his hunger for adventure, Miroslav chose the latter, hoping he would be greeted by beautiful underwater scenery. But something very different awaited him. As much as the excitement motivated him, he couldn't afford to be complacent. Powerful flashlights were rendered useless, the darkness swallowing light and creating a disorienting void. This was no ordinary dive. It was a perilous venture into a labyrinth that could quickly turn lethal. But as if things couldn't get any worse, Miroslav had already spent 25 minutes getting down there. This wouldn't have been an issue, but he only had an hour's worth of oxygen left. This meant that if he spent too long diving into the deep gallery, he would be in a race against time to make it back to the surface. That's without factoring in the time he would have to spend decompressing on his way out of the cave. Miroslav was a professional, the best diver in the crew. If there was any member of the crew who had a sure bet of diving into an unknown cave and coming back, it was him. But there was a problem. In fact, this was the biggest problem of the entire night. Whether he was the best diver or not, Miroslav wasn't entirely himself. No one ever is after the amount of alcohol he had consumed during dinner. So here was Miroslav, tipsy and alone, over 100 feet inside waters no one had ever swam in. These are the circumstances that make even the most seasoned divers scared. Meanwhile, closer to the surface, something entirely different was going on. Two of Miroslav's friends had been diving nearby earlier in the evening, but returned to the boat at 10:30 p.m., unaware that Miroslav had embarked on a solo dive into the cave. Realizing he was missing, they searched frantically, but found no trace of him. The two divers were fully aware that Miroslav only had enough air to be down in the cave for up to an hour, but more than 2 hours had elapsed. So, if there was even the slightest chance that Miroslav found an air pocket, it is possible that he could still be alive down there. But that was the best they could hope for, because they didn't even know how this cave was beyond the splits. Also, if there were no air pockets, then the worst might already have happened. At 15 minutes past midnight, authorities in Split received a chilling report. 31-year-old Czech diver Miroslav Kuklis had not returned from his dive, which had begun 3 hours earlier. The Domino crew had dived in to try to find him, hoping he would be near the mouth of the cave, but when their search yielded nothing, they knew this was out of their hands. At dawn on September 11th, a police dive team began exploring the cave's depths. Officers Oliver Marich and Bernard Magic ventured into the underwater labyrinths, following the same route that Miroslav would have followed. Knowing the dangers of entering unknown waters, the police officers made sure they were attached to a line so they wouldn't get lost themselves in the search. But Mother Nature had no regard for precautions. Whether they are taken or not, her will prevails. So even though the police were trying to be as safe as possible, it still wasn't enough. Officer Oliver unfortunately let go of the line and couldn't retrieve it, he too becoming a victim of the cave's treachery. Soon, Officer Bernard was looking for 2 bodies, but despite his best efforts, he didn't have enough air for that, so he returned to the surface just before his air ran out. With the search unsuccessful, it couldn't be completed that day and had to continue into the next. This cave was no longer the unknown maze of tunnels it was when Miroslav entered a day ago. Authorities dove in again, but this time around, they were able to systematically check both galleries. After a thorough search in the shallow gallery, Miroslav's lifeless body was found at a depth of 160 feet in a separate section of the cave from where Officer Oliver's body was discovered. Oxygen tanks and equipment indicated that Miroslav likely ran out of air. Something about Miroslav's seemed odd. His diving mask was not on his head, his regulator was not in his mouth, and most shocking of all, a knife in his chest. What initially seemed like a rescue mission was now a crime scene, and there was a possible homicide at hand. The Split police detained the Domino crew, initially suspecting foul play. 2 of Miroslav's acquaintances who were on the boat when he went for the dive failed polygraph tests and reacted strongly to terms like knife and blood. However, further investigation ruled out their involvement, but the investigation was far from over. Every electrical device and equipment from the boat of the divers was analyzed for investigation. When the dive monitors, which show the diving pattern of the divers, were examined, investigators came to a shocking revelation. Miroslav's dive monitor showed that he was swimming at a depth that none of the other divers were. Not only did it mean that none of them could have murdered him with the stab, but he was alone when it happened, and it wasn't long after this that his dive monitor flatlined, showing he was motionless by then. The only explanation for his death wasn't only haunting, but disturbing to believe it happened. Miroslav would have wanted a quick and easy death instead of letting the depth of the waters take his life, so he decided to do it himself. Furthermore, blood alcohol tests showed that he had his blood alcohol at 0.014. The truth is, he was doomed the moment he dove into the water for another look into the cave. His autopsy showed that the stab wound was 11 inches deep and also punctured his aorta, and it would have definitely killed him before he drowned, therefore ending his misery on his own terms. Miroslav may have been the first person to die in the cave, but he wasn't the last. Do you think there was a slim chance Miroslav could have survived? Let us know in the comments section, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel.